Well, this morning we are following breaking news. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has died. He passed due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac vascular disease. Cheney served alongside President George W. Bush for 2 terms. He's remembered as one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in U.S. history. He was the leading advocate for the invasion of Iraq and led armed forces as defense chief during the Persian Gulf War under President Bush Sr. The Cheney family released a statement overnight saying his wife of 61 years, his daughters, and other family members were with him when he passed. In the statement, his family said he was, quote, a good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. He was 84 years old.
Wasn't expecting the fly fishing part there, but Dick Cheney, former Vice President Dick Cheney, dead at age 84. Some say, well, it says here in the article, who became one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in U.S. history and a leading advocate for the invasion of Iraq. Complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. His family said Tuesday in a statement that he died. So he served under both the Bushes, and there is massive skull and bones society connections here in this one. So he led the armed forces as defense chief during the Persian Gulf War under George Bush Sr., which is H.W. Bush, and the vice president to H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush. Okay? And Cheney was, in effect, the chief operating officer of the younger Bush, that presidency, I guess, as well here. So massive skull and bone society connections here. The secret society at Yale University, whose insignia features a skull and crossbones with the number 322, and both the Bushes known as members. Okay. Right here I could ask Google, and look, Google will tell you, was George Bush Jr. and Sr. members of Skull and Bones? And look at what Google says. Yes, both were members of the Skull and Bones secret society at Yale. See that right there? They say they continued a family tradition. Okay. And watch. I don't think I've ever had a story with so many connections to Skull and Bones. Okay, but we'll start with this because look, you could see Dick Cheney. He dies 1/13, November 3rd. That's massive because politics equals 1/13. 13, 1/13. Huge politic numbers. You can see politics also equals 103. Look at his birthday, 130. So you get the 13. It all kind of breaks down to 13, right? 13 original colonies, 13 considered an unlucky number in the United States, right? Now, I mentioned he served under both the Bushes. Look at George Bush Sr. Look at his death date, November 30th, 1130. George Bush, H.W. Bush, look, he even died Look at that day left 31 days in the year. Remember, these numbers big time connected to politics and politicians. Remember Donald equals 31 as well? And Joe Biden hit the Senate stage the third day of the first month as well. So you're going to see this 31, you're going to see this 13, anything political. H.W. Bush was the 41st U.S. president. Skull and Bones equals 41. Dick Cheney, born in 41. Look at the death date anniversary for HW here. And look at the upcoming birthday for Dick Cheney. Look at the 41s and 14s. Even look at Cheney's birthday, January 30th. There's another 31, 1 plus 30. Look at the death date for H.W. Bush, 11/30. Add it up, you get 41. And you see the 41 and 14 numerology to go with both. And to go with Skull and Bones one more time. Look at how Yale equals 43. George W. Bush Jr., right? 43rd U.S. president. Richard equals 43. Dick Cheney's actual name is Richard. Richard Cheney equals 76, like Skull and Bones. George W. Bush's birthday is 7/6. Let's see if Dick Cheney will Google tell us. This is the Brotherhood of Death, okay? This is the nickname for Skull and Bones, located at Yale. The secret society. And this is what they tell us. They tell us this is an organization. I mean, look at the logo. It looks kind of wicked, right? We hear stories about rituals they have to perform. Obviously, the two Bushes in powerful positions in the world, right? So this society located at Yale. Will Google tell us if Dick Cheney was a member? Was Dick Cheney a member of Skull and Bones? He's definitely connected. And not really, as it's supposed to be secretive, right? But they do tell us that William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, all three members. But Dick Cheney connected to the Bushes. And you can see this stuff is connected, right? This stuff is connected as he is connected to those two. And you see how he has Skull and Bones connections with him. And look, we even have more. Former Vice President Dick Cheney. Look at this. Vice President equals 149, like Skull and Bones. Vice President equals 76, like Skull and Bones. Richard Cheney, 76. George W. Bush, 76 on his birthday. Isn't that amazing right there? Look at that. Remember that number 322 for Skull and Bones. Look at when I put the founded date for Skull and Bones. Look, 1832, like 322. You see that? Vice President equals 202, like Skull and Bones. Wow, right? Look at how it hits. Look at how it hits. Did we hit with all 4 base ciphers? Skull and Bones 202, Skull and Bones 149, Skull and Bones 76, Skull and Bones 41. We hit with all 4 of the base ciphers with the Society Skull and Bones. I think Skull and Crossbones equals let's see, Skull and Crossbones. Let's write out Skull and Crossbones. Okay, that's 61 hits upcoming. And 223 is the 48th prime number, dead at 84, the reflection. The 61 hits right here, we'll come back to it. And I think the slide's coming up here. Because look at this right here. So at first I thought this was the dates and stuff all connected to Cheney. But they mentioned the Capitol riot here. Years after leaving office, Cheney became a target of President Donald Trump, especially after his daughter Liz Cheney became the leading Republican critic and examiner of Trump's desperate attempts to stay in power after his 2020 election defeat and his actions in the Capitol riot. The 6th day of the first month, remember, Skull and Crossbones equals 61. Look at the death date anniversary of H.W. Bush, November 30th. Look at that, Cheney's upcoming birthday, 61 days after the H.W. Bush death anniversary. So 6th day of the first month, 61. 61 days. Skull and Crossbones equals 61. Remember, John equals 61, as in Donald John Trump. Okay. J.D. Vance's birthday, or excuse me, his wife's birthday, and Eric Trump's birthday, the 6th day of the first month. Skull and Crossbones 61. Good stuff, huh?
Former Vice President Dick Cheney dead at age 84. At the White House, the flags lowered to half-staff to honor Cheney. You see here, he was one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in U.S. history. CBS's Jared Hill reports.
Dick Cheney had been a player in Washington politics for 30 years.
Surprised they didn't say 31 years. Donald Trump also equals 48, which is the 84 reflection, dead at 84 here. And that's also Barack Obama's birthday, August 4th, the 8th month and the 4th day.
George W. Bush tapped him to be his running mate.
He really wanted me to come on board because he thought I could help govern, be part of his team.
Cheney led the Bush administration in the war against terror following the September 11th attacks and urged military action against Iraq.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Infamously never found, Cheney blamed bad intelligence and remained an influential advisor to President Bush.
Dick Cheney, a man of great integrity, sound judgment, and experience.
Richard Bruce Cheney was born in 1941 and grew up in Wyoming. He married his high school sweetheart, Lynn, with whom he had 2 daughters. In Washington, Cheney worked as an assistant in the Nixon White House. He then served as President Ford's chief of staff and won 5 terms as Wyoming's representative in Congress. At age 37, he suffered his first heart attack. That didn't deter President George H.W. Bush from making him Secretary of Defense. Cheney was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his handling of Operation Desert Storm. He suffered 3 more heart attacks before becoming vice president.
In terms of the kinds of activities I can engage in professionally, there are no restrictions.
While vice president, Cheney accidentally shot and injured his friend Harry Whittington during a hunting trip. A mishap he called one of the worst days of his life.
Dick Cheney came in.
Cheney endorsed President Trump in his first campaign, but following the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol.
Remember Dick Cheney. Dick and Bush, right? Dick and Bush. Think about it. And remember, Dick Cheney shot a guy named Harry. Okay? So you got Dick and Bush, and Dick Cheney accidentally shot uh, during a quail hunting trip in 2006 was named Harry Whittington. Okay? Can you believe that? Dick, Bush, and Harry. He shoots a guy named Harry. And look, during a quail hunting trip, Dan Quayle was the vice president to H.W. Bush. Look, Whittington, kind of like White House. Can you believe that? Look, and Dan Quayle was the VP to H.W. Bush. Can you believe it? Look at this. Dan Quayle was the 44th vice president serving under George H.W. Bush. Isn't that amazing? And Dick shot a guy named Harry during a quail hunting trip. Dick Bush. Dick Harry Bush. Harry Dick Bush. Quail hunting trip. Dan Quayle. Isn't that a joke? All of this stuff is connected, and that is a massive riddle. Isn't that stupid? It's ridiculous, man. God. I I know I mentioned that before. That's just horrendous. You can't make this stuff up. Or you can. Okay? Dick Cheney, one of the most powerful and polarizing vice presidents in U.S. history, dies at 84. You could break this down further if you want. If you catch anything or if I missed anything, let me know. That's the breakdown. Until next time.